Hello everyone, welcome. This is Massa and today I'll be talking about intercultural communication challenges in service-based fields like hospitality, food service and tourism through the lens of language for specific purposes, or basically just LSP. Here's what I'll cover in this video. First, we'll define culture and look at two key perspectives. Then we'll explore intercultural communication and how it plays out in real-world service encounters. And next, we'll look at language for specific purposes and occupational settings, followed by common challenges in service roles. And finally, we'll consider what these challenges actually mean for language educators. But before we get into definitions and frameworks, let's take a step into the real world. To understand the why behind this topic, it helps to start with an example. So let me begin with a story. This is Yumiko, a young woman from Japan who has just arrived in Australia. Full of hope for a fresher start. After a long flight, she decides to unwind at a local cafe. It's her first day and she just wants to relax with a cold drink. Yumiko enters the cafe and walks up to the counter and says politely, "Apple juice, please." The waitress frowns and sharply replies, "What?" Yumiko repeats herself, "Apple juice." But this time, the waitress, impatient and unclear, says in very fast English, "What do you want?" Yumiko freezes and loses her confidence. She gives up. With a soft voice, this time she says, "Orange juice." The waitress responds with a quick okay and the moment is over. But something was definitely lost. A simple drink order became an uncomfortable exchange. So what exactly went wrong here? Was it Yumiko's pronunciation? Was it the waitress's accent or impatience? The story I just shared is drawn and adapted from Ingrid Piller's book, A Life in a New Language 2024. According to Piller, language learners in real-life service jobs often have to work in fast, unpredictable situations when people are not very patient. Interlocutors may become actually quite aggressive, impatient, or even lose interest when communication isn't perfect. And these aren't just language problems, they are intercultural challenges. And to understand them better, we need to start with one big question, and that is, what is culture? Now, the truth is, there is no single definition. Culture has been understood in many different ways, and in this video, I'll focus on two key perspectives. The first one, according to Bondi 2004, is the essentialist view, which treats culture as something that we all have, as something we're born with. It's seen as fixed, stable, and passed down over generation and over time. The second is the social constructivist view, according to Durant in 1997, which sees culture not as a possession actually, but as something we do. It is constantly built and rebuilt through things like power, habit, and social interaction. One scholar who explains this clearly is Brian Street. He argues that culture isn't something we're born with, it's something we actively create through our everyday actions and choices. So to him, culture is a verb, it's like a process and action, not a noun, not a state. Once we have an idea of what culture is, we can explore what happens when people from different cultural backgrounds, from London, from Italy, from Turkey, when they come together and interact. This is where intercultural communication comes in. As Ingrid Piller 2017 explains, intercultural communication is not just about translating words. It's not just about vocabulary or grammar. It's about how we negotiate meaning across cultural differences. It's about how we manage politeness, tone, silence, and even misunderstandings, often without realizing it. So let's look back at the apple juice exchange. The problem wasn't just Yumiko's accent, it was a breakdown in negotiation. The waitress didn't slow down, she didn't adapt, and Yumiko didn't feel safe or supported enough to try again. She was a customer, expecting a basic level of service. So this brings us to an important point. These kinds of interactions don't really happen in a vacuum. They happen in specific environments, cafes, airports, front desk, places where language isn't just for chatting, but for doing a job. That's where language for specific purposes, or LSP, comes to play. According to Colin Keats et al. 2015, LSP is all about teaching the kind of language people actually need, where in real-life work situations like talking to customers, writing reports, or giving instructions on the job. So basically, instead of general English, it focuses on the practical language needed in a specific field. And one important branch of this LSP is called Language for Occupational Purposes, or LOP, to put it simply. This focuses specifically in service jobs that involve interacting with people, according to Belcher 2006, like waiters, hotel staff, and call center agents. In these kinds of service roles, things can get really complicated, because it's not just about speaking English, it's about understanding different ways of speaking, behaving, and interpreting meaning. So next, let's look at some of the key intercultural challenges that researchers have found in service jobs across different countries and cultures. These studies come from a wide range of places, as you can see, from the USA, from Brazil, Spain, Algeria, Vietnam, and of course, Australia. And these studies involve workers interacting in English with people from across the world. Now, one of the key common challenges was with accents and pronunciation. For example, in a study by Suwato et al., we could see the confusing numbers of 30 and 13, or even not recognizing unfamiliar pronunciations like réservation or réservation, which came from French guest in the Vietnamese case study by Pham. Vocabulary gaps also created problems, and idiomatic language. One shop assistant didn't know the word scarf in English, of course, and had to guess by showing different items. In another study, idioms like "no worries, mate" was actually misunderstood. It was not seen as a sign of reassurance, but actually as a sign of irritation, annoyance, or anger. Cultural expectations around politeness often led to miscommunication as well. For instance, a Japanese guest found Hi too casual. In contrast, Korean shopkeepers avoided a small talk which African American customers interpreted as quite rude or even discriminatory, in the study of Bailey 2000. And moreover, a handshake offered by a female staff member made a Middle Eastern guest quite uncomfortable, in the study of Miguel 2024. These moments triggered quite a stress in the staff, sometimes physically, like sweating, and at other times emotionally, such as panic or the urge to withdraw from the interaction. Non-verbal behavior added another layer of difficulty. Smiles, eye contact, and gestures were often misinterpreted. In the study of Miguel 2024, we could see the Brazilians' constant smiling seemed quite fake and ungenuine to Europeans. In contrast, American guests valued direct eye contact as a sign of respect, something not shared by all cultures, apparently, in the study of Algeria. And a Japanese guest, for example, pulled away from a handshake and preferred a bow, something the staff weren't prepared for. So what's polite in one culture in a nutshell may feel actually intrusive or inappropriate in another. What's more is that many staff were trained using textbook English, which didn't prepare them for actually casual, idiomatic language used by real guests, and it sounded quite mechanical, or let's say robotic. This gap left them unsure how to respond during everyday interactions. Finally, last but not least, some staff coped by code switching. For example, in one study, they mixed Spanish and English, the staff, and they used gestures to explain menus when language alone wasn't enough. So what do these challenges actually mean for language teaching in service fields? What are the implications, in another word? First, we need to teach more than just grammar and vocabulary. Learners also need to understand things like tone, politeness, how culture shapes communication. Or in other words, according to Kandel-Moore 2015, intercultural competence. Second, we should design our courses based on real workplace needs. This means using real tasks, authentic materials, and everything that reflect the jobs learners are preparing for. And finally, when it comes to assessment or evaluating the students' or learners' performance, tests should actually test what learners need to do at work, like handling misunderstandings, adapting to different customers, negotiation, or communicating across cultures, as Mora again mentions. So recognizing these implications can help us design language courses that truly prepare learners for the real-world challenges they face. I hope this video has given you some useful insights into how intercultural communication shapes service encounters and what that means for LSP and LOP teaching. For further reading, the sources I used are listed here. Thanks again for your time, and goodbye.